Hello, this is Calvin Idle. Welcome to the Lavender Table, a web-based talk show for and about the LGBT community. And now, let's keep the conversation going with your host, Gary Elgin.
My guest tonight is Ed Jarnagin. In October of 1999, when he was just 24 years old, Ed met a man who he described as the love of his life, Ron Samples. Ron was twice his age and lived over 50 miles away, but 5 months after first meeting, they moved in together. They had a civil union in Vermont after 5 years, but in 2011, Ron passed away suddenly while the couple was on a cruise. This is a story of love, loss, and grief, and living again. Next on the Lavender Table. Ed, welcome, and thank you for joining us here on the Lavender Table.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your willingness to sit down and share your memories of your life with your partner, Ron. How did you meet?
Good old-fashioned way, the internet.
Old-fashioned?
Well, it's old-fashioned now.
So it was good timing?
Yes.
What was your life like prior to meeting Ron?
Oh, I lived in Tazewell, which was Tazewell, Tennessee, which was very, you couldn't be openly gay there. You were in the closet, and that was it. And the internet was a new world for me. You go on and meet people there, and it just so happened I met Ronnie, and we decided to meet.
Did you have many relationships prior to meeting Ron?
Two short ones, which in gay terminology, one was like 2 months, the other was like 6 months. It might as well have been 6 years the way it felt, but yes, very short.
How would you meet men prior to meeting Ron on the internet?
You go to places where you don't necessarily feel proud of that you go to. You go to bars or meet in just not so great places, I'll put it that way.
Clandestine?
Yes.
Have you always been attracted to men as mature as Ron?
Yes. Guys my age I've never really been attracted to, and I've always been I guess more mature for my age, and I tend to gravitate to people that are more mature.
What attracted you as a 24-year-old man to a man of 50?
Well, I think because what it was is that we connected maturity on a maturity level. We laughed at each other's jokes. We were attracted to each other physically and mentally. That's the best way that I can explain it.
Soon after moving in, Ron had major surgery.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tell us about that.
Let's see if I get these dates right. June 26th, 2000. I would get home from work before he would, and he got home. He had actually had a doctor's appointment that day, and he came home and he was crying. I was asking him what was wrong, and he said, "I'm in congestive heart failure, and I have to have surgery." So he said, I have to go to the hospital now. So I take him to the hospital, and they check him in, and they run tests. He was in for a day, and then the next day, which was after that, was the 28th. And so on the June 28th, he had, and I can't believe the surgeon was so just nonchalant about it. They said there's going to be a triple bypass. He actually had a quintuple bypass. He said, "Oh, he had a 5." It's like, oh, okay. So
So this is how long after you moved in?
I moved in March 2nd, 2000, and June 28th, 2000 is when he had his surgery.
So just a matter of months.
Yes. Yes.
So Ron didn't tell you of his heart condition before you moved in?
He didn't know. He didn't know.
At one point he said to you, if you can't handle it, he would understand.
Right. The evening before he was to have surgery, he had surgery the next morning. He said, you know, if you want to leave me, I'll understand. And
What did that feel like?
well, it hurt me, but I understood where he was coming from because, you know, he didn't want to put me through it. You know, he knew that we had just gotten together. You know, and this is me thinking now, looking back. We had just gotten together. I was young, had my life in front of me, and I honestly think that if I had been a cruel person and just left him, I think he would have died then. I think he would have just given up because we were so close at that point that, you know, I don't want to sound like I am the reason he made it through the surgery, but I think that he would have given up because he wouldn't have had anyone to lean on at that point. So,
What was his life before you?
he had a few relationships. Actually, he was married up until 1982 and divorced, and then had a few relationships in between. You know, when we met. I think the longest relationship he had in between was, I think, 7 years. But yeah, he was single for probably a year and a half or so, I think, before we met. But he was dating, but he wasn't serious with anybody.
Tell us a little bit about your life together.
It was amazing. I mean, you know, I'm not going to say that, you know, it was perfect, but it was as close to perfect as it could be. I mean, he had a great sense of humor. He was fiery. He was feisty. Actually, let me retract that. He is fiery. He is feisty. I don't like saying was because he hasn't changed. But at any rate, he's sexy. He's my best friend. So he loved to garden. He loved to antique. He loved travel. He wasn't afraid of anything. He had no fear, and those are the things, a few things that I really respect about him. And also, he taught me how to love.
Explain that.
Well, when we first met, this sounds crazy, and I'm sure that some people, when they first come out, especially gay men, they kind of think this way. I thought I was bi. And I think when you're brought up, you know, when you're being brought up, gay is just, gay, you know. But if you're bi, there's a chance, you know. And so I never forget, I came down one weekend, this is before we met, before we moved in, and we kissed. And prior to that, I told him that I was bi, and he said, "Bi men don't kiss like that." So,
Got you.
yeah, and really, I was uncomfortable with myself. I didn't love myself as who I am, or as who I was at that point. So he taught me how to accept myself and love myself. And if you can't love yourself, you can't love anyone else.
What did Ron do for a living?
He was a finance director for a social service agency in Sevierville, placing highly functional, mentally retarded adults and teens in group homes and into jobs. He was there for 30 years.
Between Ron's bypass and July of 2010, was he relatively healthy?
He had diabetes, and you know, I'm not a small guy. He wasn't a small guy. But he had to have a couple neck surgeries. He had some issues with his neck. But other than his diabetes and those surgeries, everything was good. But I mean, he maintained his diabetes. It didn't get to the point where it was just crazy high or anything. His sugar was high or anything. I moved in, and it took me 2 weeks to find a job. First week he kind of gave me a pass because I was out looking. Second week he's like, no, you gotta find, because I mean I can understand his feeling. I've got this 24-year-old kid here. I'm gonna have to support this guy, but I've never been that way. I never wanted anyone to support me. I always wanted to make my own money.
So Ron was not set up as a sugar daddy.
No. And that's another interesting part of everything too. Is when I first met Ron, I knew it was the real deal. I mean, so I wasn't out to my family yet. So I came out to my family, and my mother. It was kind of opposite situation. I thought my dad would disown me and my mom would be okay. My mom didn't, but it was the opposite. My mom didn't disown me, but she was freaking out more than my dad did. My dad was like, I love you, I don't care. My mom was asking questions. She asked me, I told her how, the age difference and everything, and the first thing she asked me was, does he have any money? And I said, he does okay, but I have my own money, so, But that's the misconception that comes with an age difference, that, younger guys with older guy, because of a money thing. Yes, sometimes that happens, but not all the time.
In July of 2010, Ron was once again hospitalized.
Right. Yeah, he said it was something, he said his kidneys were failing. The doctors said his kidneys were failing, so he had told me it was a combination of his medications. So he went in, everything was cleared up, he was fine. They gave him, basically, as I thought, a clear bill of health, and let him go out, go to the out of the hospital and back home.
Now you say as far as you thought.
As far as I thought, yes.
Okay. Were you concerned that perhaps there was something else going on?
Honestly, I was concerned, but when you're in the situation, when you're on the inside, you don't necessarily see everything. And, if it was now in retrospect, on the outside looking in, I could see that there were some things that I should have seen, and I just didn't see.
Talk to me about the organ that now sits in the church.
Oh, the organ. Well, after after he passed away, there was an organ fund in lieu of flowers, basically, for donations, and the church wanted to purchase an organ and dedicate it in Ron's memory, and I assisted with that. So there's a lot of things here in this church that have Ron written all over it, and I'm proud of that. There'll always be a piece of him here.
In March of 2011, you embarked on what would be your last cruise together.
Right.
Take us through that.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I didn't think about this until recently, we moved in together March 2nd, 2000. We left for the cruise March 2nd, 2011. So we lived in our home together exactly 11 years, which I'm weird about numbers, but anyway, we left, we drove to Fort Lauderdale, and we went to the Bahamas and Aruba and Curacao. And
Had you ever been before?
I've been to the Bahamas before, but not Aruba and Curacao. And we had an amazing time there. Aruba is basically, to me, I mean, it was beautiful, but it was a hotter version of Gatlinburg. It was T-shirt central, but it was fun. We had a really good time. We had a great time on board. went to several Friends of Dorothy meetings and met a couple there that we had dinner with a couple different times on the trip, and I still talk to every now and then to this day.
So you met at a Friends of Dorothy meeting.
Right.
So for those viewers that are unfamiliar with the phrase Friends of Dorothy, what does that mean?
It's basically where gay men meet up and they all enjoy Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. They're big fans of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz.
So it's kind of a on the sly code.
Right.
Well, you mentioned to me previously that you had an uneasy feeling from the very beginning of your trip.
Right. Like we were going to have car trouble, or it's just something was going to happen during the trip, and I just didn't know what it was.
So it was like a premonition.
Right. Right.
Talk to us about the last night of the cruise.
The last night of the cruise, we had gone out to dinner with the couple we had met and spent some time with from the Friends of Dorothy meetings. And we went and saw a show, and there was a lounge singer singing, show tunes. And the last song that was sung was My Way by Frank Sinatra. So, had a couple drinks, went back to our stateroom, and it was about midnight, and we kissed, said I love you, and we went to bed.
What happened then?
About 4:30, I think between 4:30 and 5 a.m. Let me back up. We were there when Ron's mom passed away. So if you've ever been around someone when they're passing away, you know what that's like. There's certain sounds that are made when someone's passing away. And about 5 a.m., I woke up, and Ron was sitting on the couch in the stateroom. Now, most times, because of his neck issues and his back issues, he would get up during the night and sleep in a chair at home. So at some point, he had gotten up and sat in the couch. And I woke up, and he was making these sounds, basically what they call the death rattle. And I knew immediately what was going on. So I tried CPR. I checked for, he didn't have a pulse when I got to him, but I did try CPR. I called 911 and they got there and they tried, but they weren't able to bring him back. They had said that it was a massive heart attack. I am thankful, at least, you do see bright sides out of a situation, but I'm thankful at least that he was on a trip with me. We were in love with each other. We had an amazing time, but he wasn't in a hospital attached to machines. So, and he didn't, as far as I know, I don't think he suffered that much. But it was, to say the least, being there alone, not knowing anyone else, and then losing someone that you're in love with. I honestly do not know how I got through that particular point. It was all a blur. That whole day was a blur to me. Actually, probably the first 3 months after he died was a blur to me. But it was a hard day. It was a really hard day. I had to get out of the room. I was in the room for a good few minutes while they were working on him, and it got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore, and I had to walk out.
You told me that at some point you realized that Ron knew he was dying.
At least that's what I think in my view at this point. But prior to when we left on the trip, we came to church that last Sunday, and our priest would always ask if anyone would like to have their head anointed with oil for healing. And Ron had came up to the altar rail and had his head anointed, and I'd never seen him do it before. So after he passed away, I was asked if I'd like to have a priest pray with us and read scripture, and I said yes. And the priest came, and after he was done, he anointed his head with oil, and it all came back to him at that point. Like he knew something was going on.
Recently, you took a trip to Scotland.
Right. Ron, he always wanted to be cremated, so he was cremated in Fort Lauderdale, and his ashes were sent here. He passed away on March 11th, and his service was on March the 27th here at the church. So half of his ashes are buried in a garden behind the church here. And so I kept the other half. Well, he was Scottish, of Scottish descent. I was too. I am. We went to Scottish festivals. He really enjoyed everything Scottish. He always wanted to go to Scotland, but never got to go. So last April 2012, I took the rest of his ashes to Scotland and spread his ashes in Scotland.
Did you ever think love would come again?
Honestly,
Thank you.